Hi, folks. A few weeks ago we had as guests on the show Nate Mackinnon from the Community College Association and Mount Wachusett Community College President Jim Vander Hooven to talk about the launch of the new Mass ReConnect program, which grants free community college to adults over 25. That was a September show that we did, and you can and should go back and check that out if you hadn't heard it yet. But near the end of that interview, I said, well, maybe you'll come back later on and tell me how it went. Well, it turns out we don't have to wait very long to do that. Instead of talking with, college presidents and executive directors, though, we're going to talk to an actual student who's going through the process and using Mass ReConnect. He's here to tell us all about it, how it's going and how it's been. And his name is Brendan Melican. Brendan, welcome, and thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan, for giving me the opportunity to come on.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell me and everybody listening just a little bit about yourself and your family and how you got here?
Sure. So I'm 47 years old, live out in Worcester. I've got one son who is actually a freshman in college himself, so we're kind of we're navigating these waters together. And then obviously my wife as well. I'm a lifelong resident of Worcester. I grew up in Worcester, and I was raised in a family of educators. This is going to sound silly, but it took me a long time to realize this myself, but I probably squandered more educational opportunities than most people are offered as a young person. I definitely dabbled with higher ed after high school, did some semesters at Worcester State. Now Worcester State University, but it was college at the time. Also took some classes at Quinsig. But between a mix of seeking employment, probably undiagnosed ADHD, and just general boredom, I never finished. I would usually start a semester loaded with classes that I found interesting, and this is the one. And then it was usually by the drop point of most semesters. That's when I would walk away. And then when this opportunity came up, I'll be honest, I started following the conversation when Governor Healy first brought it up as part of her campaign. I really wasn't paying attention to what was working its way through the House and the Senate. The intersection, though, with my son getting ready to go to college and a few things that happened over the last decade where I had spent a lot of time in and out of healthcare facilities with loved ones. Way in my past, I worked as an EMT and also worked for the New England Organ Bank. Always found myself really comfortable in that universe, and figured, if I'm going to convince my son to go to college, bad parenting not to be willing to do the same thing that making our kid do. So I took the opportunity to register at Quinsig for their pre-nursing program, which ultimately is what I'm shooting for, is their nursing program. And then the timing, just the stars aligned perfectly where this program came through. Not that community college was the largest burden in terms of finances, but it really took the edge off, knowing that the state was both backing me and encouraging me as an older, non-traditional learner to be going back into the classroom. So here we are.
That's amazing. So, when you were talking about your history of education and things like that, made me think of a lot. I'm sure that it's a very common story for a lot of people. I know I've had my wife before on the show as a guest, as an adult learner, because we actually met in college, and she left after her first year and went back for a year to a different college, and then dropped out, and then went back for a semester, and then dropped out, and kind of had that desire to go back, but something always happened to derail. So I think
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that is, like you said, very common. And the interesting thing too, and I think the partnership, whether it was for financial reasons or it was actually thought out, fully thought out, the relationship and the focus on community colleges actually makes a lot more sense. I mean, as I mentioned, I'm shooting to work through Quinsig's nursing program, but it's already the first semester, and I'm starting to look at 4-year programs to pivot into a BSN instead of the degree as an RN. And there is something to be said for the environment in the community colleges that, again, it's been 30 years since I've formally sat in a classroom. There's some catching up to do. the comfort level with the professors in working with, again, non-traditional students has been fantastic. And I feel like that's what's important about this program is just that it's taking a lot of the roadblocks out of the way for folks that probably recognize that there would be some value for them going back to the classroom. But again, there are always roadblocks in the way. It's going to be too hard. There's too much catching up to do. The community colleges are perfectly primed for that.
That's great to know. And you, I imagine that's something that you're able to compare from your other experiences being at colleges.
Absolutely, and I mean, this time it's more, it's funny, to be honest with you, and thankfully my professors all have a good sense of humor, but I had to explain to my math professor this year that I do understand what we're doing in the classroom. It's just that over the last 30 years, mathematics and the way it's taught has changed completely. My father was actually a math teacher. When I was a kid, learning mathematics was sitting down with a pack of flashcards that were printed in the 30s, and you just got yelled at if you remembered everything in the box. Now they actually want to show you how you're accomplishing everything. So yeah, there is some learning to do, but it's an environment that it's probably more similar in some regards to the way high school students should be presented a lot of the material. And again, it's just one more roadblock that was taken out of the way for me that did actually create a lot of anxiety. As someone who's approaching 50, you don't want to walk into a classroom with people who are a third your age and be the one who's struggling. And that hasn't been the experience that I've had thus far at all.
Yeah, can you tell me any more about what your in-class experience has been like?
It's funny because some of the classes, I am ticking off a lot of boxes that are things that I've actually done professionally and along the way. So what I'm going to say is remedial, a beginning composition English class. There's a lot of students in there who've never really put pen to paper from a research perspective, or have never done any creative writing. That's just something that I've done for myself for the last 20 plus years. So it's put me in an odd position where I actually have something to offer the students aside from what the professor is getting through to the students. And I keep finding myself in this interesting position where I've got very young people after class pulling me aside, asking everything from questions about what's going on in class to general life questions, which is actually really a rewarding feeling, to be honest with you. I was expecting my life to look a lot like an episode of Community, and instead it's actually been a really rewarding experience overall. I don't feel like an outcast being on this campus in the slightest.
And so how long do you have to go until you finish your program at the community college?
So it's interesting, and it's, again, where this program came into play in a really nice way. Quinsigamond Community College has a waiting list for their nursing program, and that waiting list is about 2 years. So what they did a few years back was create a degree program that they title a pre-nursing program that you're not actually expected to finish as a degree. It's really just a holding area that then allows you to take advantage of any FAFSA opportunities, any grant opportunities, because you're in a degree-based program. And really what you're doing is a combination of waiting for a slot to open up in the nursing program, but also ticking off the prerequisites for that program as well, too. So the TEAS test is the big one, the entrance exam for nursing, but then any prerequisites that you may not have taken, even if you were a traditional student and you came out of high school and you didn't have the necessary biology or chemistry AP classes that will be required to enter into the program, it gives you some time to tick those off. Anywhere from 3 to 4 years is the average from the beginning of that pre-nursing program to the end of the nursing program. And the community colleges as a whole, but Quinsigamond in particular, has a really nice structure in which they'll identify for you the points that, you've made it this far. This is exactly when you might want to think about pivoting to a 4-year program to shoot for a BSN versus just sticking with the RN degree program in this case. And that seems to be the case across the board. I know Quinsigamond Community College has a big STEM program at this point, structured the very similar way. You can certainly walk away with certificates or a 2-year degree, but if you're really paying attention to what the advisors are putting in front of you, they're also identifying the times that you should be thinking about transferring out to a 4-year school if a bachelor's is what you're shooting for.
And if I can go back and ask you about when you made your decision to actually use Mass ReConnect or to go back to school. You said you were sort of following it as it was going through. So was that sort of instrumental in your decision to seek this sort of degree program, or was it not?
No, I had committed myself to actually pulling the trigger this year to start school. And again, I had lost sight of what was happening on a state level in terms of the funding model and how it was going to work. It was actually somewhat up at the school. As I was working through some of the admissions process as the semester started, one of the advisors up there suggested that I run through the FAFSA program, just because I've got a son in school. Just the more the merrier is kind of the way it's structured. And that was actually the first time I realized that the state funding model had already begun, and it was backed into the FAFSA program. So it was really just one extra step in an otherwise seamless process of making sure I was taking advantage of anything that I might be eligible for from a scholarship or from the FAFSA side of things. And then the state just reared its head and took care of the rest, which again was really nice. I'm making light, but it was a big deal. It's again, community college is not the most expensive thing in the world, but it's still a cost, and it was nice to see the state sliding in to take that off the table for me.
And there wasn't anything that special that you had to do to qualify for it. Just file your FAFSA.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. And I mean, if for anyone who is thinking about this program and hasn't gone through FAFSA is one of those things that does seem like a nightmare if you're not used to it, or it's just another big federal program. It's actually very streamlined. It's if your taxes are in order, the core requirements that they really pull in all the data they need from partner organizations on the federal level, and then where the state comes in, that was seamless. It was just another tick box. Do you want to be moved into this pipeline as well? I really had to do nothing from the perspective of going through the FAFSA pipeline. What the state had to offer was just there for me.
And I want to talk about your other student in the house. Is it your son, you said?
It is, yeah. So he's a freshman at Texas A&M. He's in their Corps of Cadets, shooting for an Air Force contract. He's looking to commission as an officer in the Air Force. And, he and I have, an interesting relationship that I do like as a father, pushing him a bit out of his comfort zone, if you will. But I've never felt fair about pushing him without also pushing myself. And this was an easy one, and it's kind of the running joke in the house now. Is we both will needle his mother, my wife, as to whose graduation she's going to carve out time to hit, because we're likely to be graduating generally the same time. Obviously, we'll both be down there to see him, but it's kind of funny because we are working through very new environments and a very new process to both of us at the same time. Oddly enough, though, all the things that I'm struggling with, he did in high school. So he's actually able to help me out quite a bit.
I was going to ask you if he's able to help you. Yeah.
100%. A best tutor I ever could have asked for. No, I'm serious. And it sounds silly, but it's been fantastic. And look, I mean, the reality is he will always be my son, but he's an adult now. So it's great to have somebody that at this point is essentially a peer from an education perspective. And I've always told him, you don't know what you don't know. That goes for me, too. And if I can find someone that close that can help me out, it's fantastic. We're a little far away, and there's a time zone change, so I do have to be respectful of his time when it comes to asking for help. But he's always been there for me when I've needed it, so it's been great.
That's great. And he's, supportive of you, and you're supportive of him, so...
He thinks I do change things up quite a bit in my life. I tend to get bored easy. Again, I mentioned earlier, half jokingly, the undiagnosed ADHD. And I've gone through a bunch of different career paths. All of them have been wildly successful, but I tend to pivot every now and then. He grew up with that, so he's used to it. This one he just finds wildly entertaining. And it's also been a bit of a running joke. He'll get Snapchat pics throughout the day from friends that he has that are on campus. Hey, I saw your dad today. Which... At least he knows I'm not cutting class, so that's worked out well.
So that's good, and you've been able to sort of incorporate everything as a student into your life in general with other things, and
I don't want to sound like I'm just doing marketing for Quinsigamond Community College here, but I think that is one of the things that the community colleges as a whole have done fantastic is they've always had their doors open to non-traditional students. And if you, whatever class you need, chances are good it's taking place first thing in the morning, midday, at night, multiple days a week. They really do structure their environment for folks who are working, who have other commitments, and may not just be able to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning for school. I'm fortunate that between professional life and my personal needs, I am able to be up there in the morning during normal school hours. But between remote classes, off-campus classes, satellite campuses, and a very, very well fleshed out schedule, I've run into no hurdles in terms of scheduling between professional life, personal life, and my new title as student.
It's funny. To hear you talk about it, it strikes me that we've had a few guests on the show before who were community college students who just gushed about their community college and just loved it so much. And not just Quinsigamond, but I think there was a Greenfield Community College student here,
sure.
On the show as well, and there were some other ones I can't remember. But it just strikes me that is a sentiment that we hear a lot.
Yeah, and it's an interesting mix. I feel like you have a mix of newer professors who are getting their legs under them, but they're very excited about being in a classroom, higher ed environment, as well as a lot of professors who have, been in four-year schools, taught across the country and whatnot, and landed in New England, Massachusetts for whatever reason, and this is their sort of retirement job, if you will. But they're seasoned as educators. The resources up there, again, don't want to sound like I'm marketing for the school here, but it has been fantastic. And I did attend Quinsig for half a semester back in the 90s. It wasn't the same school. The resources that the state has put in has been fantastic.
Now, do you know of anybody else who's using this program?
I don't. I've seen a few people on campus that age-wise, it's very possible. There's a few that I've been meaning to try and track down and make sure they know the program exists. But there are a few people up there that I know that are coming in, taking advantage of GI Bill offerings and whatnot. I mean, there are a fair number of older students that are up there, and I'm by no means the oldest. But I haven't really got a sense of how many people at the school overall are taking advantage of this particular program.
If there was somebody who was thinking about doing it, or possibly, what would you say to that person?
No, I think that's an easy one. Just do it. And the reality is, even if you weren't thinking you need to go back to school. And so in a past life, I owned a small business. Even if I was still in wearing that hat, I still think I would have taken advantage of this, but it probably wouldn't have been for a nursing program. It probably would have been a degree in accounting or some other business management. There are just so many small pockets of degree fields and certificate programs within the community college system that I think would fit the needs of almost anybody. And there are a lot of us out there who, for whatever reason, didn't choose the 4-year route when we should have. And yeah, there's no reason not to at this point. It's easy to come up with excuses, and I did that for years. I probably should have done this years ago, but I didn't, and here we are. And I think that's the same for everybody. Just because you didn't do it in the past doesn't mean you can't make time in the future. And the resources have never been this good. So not taking advantage of it, especially when you fold it into the program the state is offering now, taking care of the tuition side of things, it actually kind of starts seeming silly not to jump in.
Any advice for any students who are taking advantage of the program at being a little bit older, and as a student going back into school, what would be some good pieces of advice?
Just pace yourself. I mean, you know what you're capable of. Don't try and overextend yourself. The scheduling thing in particular is kind of hard. It's again, I've spent a fair amount of time creating my own schedule, being a small business owner, and even in my current work. Being able to be in charge of your own schedule and then having somebody else dictate your time for you is a big switch to go back to. And I think pacing yourself is the important thing. And there's no harm, and certainly nobody's going to hold it against you, starting from a more remedial perspective from the foundations. It's some of those classes I'm taking because I have to, because they don't show up on my transcripts anywhere. Some of them I'm taking because I want to, because there are certain things about, again, basic arithmetic that, it was taught differently. It's a new way to learn it, and it's actually fantastic. Part of me wishes I had done this earlier because it was a struggle both my wife had in helping our son, who's now tutoring me in math, when he was in high school, because we weren't familiar with the mathematics that he was being taught. Because again, we were just taught to memorize stuff. The whole concept of factoring that didn't exist in the 80s. So it's nice actually having that perspective. The other thing too is if you are jumping in, actually appreciate it and appreciate what's going on around you. I was actually not prepared for. We all hear conversation around young people and distractions, social media, whatever the case may be. I was actually surprised how easily distracted my own brain is, and what used to be the ability to just sit down and pay attention in a classroom. Now it's every little thing that bubbles up is pulling me away from that. Learning that I've also retrained my brain to think differently than it did when I was a student through high school. And I can empathize a little bit more with young folks who are actually trying to accomplish something in higher ed. And I can also empathize with the educators who are trying to convey information and can't figure out why everyone's so distracted and no one's paying attention to me. So yeah, I think going in with a strong sense of empathy and pacing yourself would be the two things that I would focus on if I were returning, which I am. So those are the things that I'm working on.
I just have to say that I agree with you about the math. My son is in 5th grade right now, and doing math with him, they didn't do it the way, we didn't do it the way they do it now. And I was always terrible at math. And I kind of like doing it this way. It's kind of fun.
I do too. I actually have a great friend who is a math teacher and always told me, because I hated math. I struggled with it all the way through high school. And my friend told me after he got his master's, he's like, the problem was that you didn't stick with it till math got interesting. There's a point, apparently, I haven't found it yet, where math starts going from just being the rote memorization of the factoring to more philosophy and whatnot. And that is, I missed out on that. The way it's being presented to me now, if this is the way that math was presented to me starting in elementary school, I would have probably stuck with it, and we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now. I would have found something that I fell in love with and ran with it. So yeah, it's nice being exposed to things that as an adult, you like to think, I got this. This is behind me now, and realizing that there's still more to learn.
Well, will you come back after you're done and talk to us about it?
I'll come back anytime you want, man. This was a pleasure.
Pleasure for me too. Thank you so much, Brendan.
No, thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate the time.